FNAF is impossible to solve. For 10 years, fans have argued over timelines that don't add up, books that change the rules, and mysteries that never get a clear answer. Yet somehow the franchise is bigger than ever. Other horror games from 2014 disappeared, but FNAF exploded into a $297 million movie, dozens of games, and more books than anyone expected. So it made me think, what if the broken lore wasn't a flaw at all, but the reason people can't stop talking about the series? Hey everybody, I'm Jeeps, and today we're diving into why FNAF's unsolvable lore might actually be what's kept the franchise alive for so long. So with that said, let's begin. The first FNAF game was released in August 2014, introducing the original characters and gameplay systems that would define the franchise for years to come. But what really set FNAF apart was how Scott chose to deliver the story. He didn't spoon feed it, but instead he hid tiny details and secrets throughout the game, some of which would only appear occasionally on the security cameras. It was these small, almost hidden moments that allowed players to piece together the larger story for themselves. FNAF 1 set up the missing children's incident, where 5 children disappeared at Freddy's. Phone Guy also mentions the infamous Bite of 87, one of the first enduring mysteries of the entire series. Just 3 months later, FNAF 2 expanded on this world, introducing new characters, new locations, and deeper lore through the minigames that revealed another missing children's incident separate from the first one. Small details littered throughout the gameplay hinted at even bigger questions. Who were the shadow animatronics? Were the toys actually possessed? Why could the paper piles move? Even seemingly minor mysteries kept the story alive, providing solvable lore that pushed the overarching narrative forward. Then came FNAF 3, which was Scott's attempt to bring closure to the series and, kind of try and end it. The game focused on the fate of William Afton and the spirits of the missing children. Through a series of minigames, the puppet delivered cake to each child, freeing their souls in the final sequence called Happiest Day. The game also showed the original Freddy Fazbear's location 30 years later after Afton's death, ending with the building being burned down, as revealed in one of the newspaper clippings during the game. FNAF 1 to 3 formed a tightly connected trilogy, each game adding details to create a complete story. However, Scott felt FNAF 3 didn't deliver the horror he wanted. The scares weren't strong enough, and he didn't want the series to end on a note that felt safe or tame. So he continued the franchise, setting the stage for even more mysteries to come. Which I guess in perspective is fair, but at the same time, this created such a big rabbit hole. Aside from that, the first 3 games gave us lore that was messy at times, but still mostly solvable. Fans could piece together the timeline, dissect the clues, and uncover the story for themselves. But everything changed with the release of FNAF 4. FNAF 4 arrived in 2015, introducing a new location, new animatronics, or at least new versions, and a mystery that would change the series forever. At the end of the game, players were confronted with a locked box and a single line. Perhaps some things are best left forgotten for now. This wasn't like the clues in the first 3 games. Even Scott admitted in 2015 that no one had uncovered its pieces, and in 2014 he added that while there was something in the box, he never pursued it. He didn't remember, and wasn't sure if he could ever find it again. The story began to slip out of everyone's reach. Even the creator wasn't sure where the box would lead or what answer it actually held. In an interview with Darko, Scott explained that normally he writes things down and knows how the story connects, but for the FNAF 4 box, that connection never fully materialized. Now, I'm sure throughout the 10 plus years that this franchise has been going, theorists before me, like Matt Pat, popular ones, have gone over this situation again and again and again in their head, but it's painfully clear that there's really barely anything that you can actually connect to the box to find an answer for. So the real answer of the box is a mystery. From that point on, the lore started spiraling. Characters who should have stayed gone kept returning. Timelines contradicted themselves, and each new installment seemed to raise more questions than it had originally answered. FNAF had transformed from a solvable mystery into a puzzle nobody could ever fully complete, and it would just get worse from here. The community couldn't solve the mystery in time, and Scott kept releasing more and more games, each one adding layers of questions while giving fewer and fewer answers. Michael Afton, the character we play as in Sister Location, should have been gone after being scooped, but somehow survives. And I'm mainly talking about after the animatronics left him, because his skin was rotting for like weeks. Realistically, this only makes sense though because he was injected with Revenant, keeping him alive. You know, that spirit-looking, agonizing stuff? Yeah, that. Even so, fans were left scrambling to understand how he could exist or where his place is in the timeline. A mystery only clarified later with the releases of the novels and FNAF AR Special Delivery, which both introduced Remnant to the story and highlighted its importance. Meanwhile, William Afton, the series' main antagonist, kept returning again and again, despite having been killed multiple times across the games. With the release of FNAF 6, the series was supposed to finally wrap up everything, tying the story together and giving closure to the decades-long saga, much like FNAF 3 had intended. But instead, the series continued with Security Breach, which expanded upon previous events from a far point in the future, created more confusing lore, and added even more chaos. And it all traces back to that locked box in FNAF 4 alongside a variety of other moments that are still mysteries to this day. But that locked box, that single unsolved mystery, is the moment that the franchise fundamentally changed. Even the creator had lost control. The story was no longer something Scott could fully guide. From that point on, FNAF became a universe defined by its own unpredictability, with loose ends that had to be repeatedly connected elsewhere in the timeline. A pattern that continues even after Scott's retirement, as development moved to Steel Studios. After that, FNAF stopped being something anyone could fully solve. But this leads us to the real problem with FNAF's lore, a tangled, convoluted mess that's taken years to unravel. And now, it's pure chaos. Not long after FNAF 4, on December 17th, 2015, Scott released the first FNAF novel, The Silver Eyes. I didn't even realize it was the first book at the time, but it was actually the first FNAF book I picked up as a kid in elementary school, which was pretty cool. The novels are a really cool part of the franchise, but they've always created tension with the games. Scott once said that the novels are in a separate continuity from the games, meaning they weren't meant to perfectly fit together. And you can see that across the original trilogy as well as in the series, like Fazbear Frights and Tales of the Pizzaplex, which are basically collections of short stories compiled into one book. But here's the problem. Even though Scott says the games and books are separate, there are still connections that pull from the books back into the game's timeline. Characters, events, and even names like William Afton or other characters or events show up across both mediums, which makes the lore even harder to follow. That's just one example, however. But the fans now have to ask themselves, what's canon? What's just a parallel story? Are they actually completely different, or are we able to draw similarities? There's no clear answer. Then came the Steel Wool era with Security Breach in 2021, which kind of made everything even messier. The game was buggy, incomplete, and the lore was called incoherent by many fans. It ignored established details from both the books and previous games, brought back characters who had died with zero explanation, and somehow decided that the final boss should once again be William Afton. Some fans loved it, but many fans also hated it. And while some parts were definitely explained and definitely connected the timeline, other bits completely destroyed any closure FNAF 6 had attempted to provide. In the timeline, Security Breach threw it a little bit out of whack. The game raised more questions than it had answered, like previous titles, like which characters actually survived past events, how Pizzaplex fits into the overall timeline, and what exactly happened to certain animatronics that fans thought were gone for good. There's many more questions, but everything that should have been clear suddenly became a mess. Fans scrambled to piece it together, MatPat and other theorists made many videos trying to make sense of it, and Scott's responses were almost correct, but never fully right. News sources that covered the game even said that the overarching narrative might actually be unsolvable. Though FNAF may seem unsolvable though, the story can still be pieced together. We're just missing some details, the kind Steel Wool keeps dropping in new games and updates. That said, we'll probably never completely solve the timeline or the lore, because each new release keeps raising more questions than answers. And with every new answer comes a plethora of new perspectives made by the fans and the community. So this isn't just a confusing story anymore, it's a canon nightmare. The pieces don't fit, the timelines contradict themselves, and every new release seems to add even more contradictions. Fans can argue over what's real, but the truth is simple. The FNAF lore will never fully be complete. Though maybe that's the reason FNAF has lasted for so long. Because the chaos didn't just survive, it became the reason the franchise kept going. When the lore started contradicting itself, something unusual happened. Instead of fans turning away, it pulled them in even deeper. Every new game may answer a question or two, but ends up creating several more. And while that may seem like a negative thing, that meant fans had to keep looking, analyzing minigames, examining clues, and trying to make sense of the story. People spent years trying to piece together what had happened, and even after all that time, the timeline still doesn't fully make sense, or individually, the lore. The contradictions kept the story alive, and each new release didn't just add new games, it added new mysteries. The locked box from FNAF 4, for example, changed everything. That single unsolved moment created a chain reaction, questions about missing children or other events, William Afton, and how the characters survived or came back, what could be in the box. Fans had to constantly rethink what they thought they knew. Because of that cycle, FNAF didn't just continue, it expanded into a massive story across multiple games and books. And every installment added new locations, animatronics, and events, but also new contradictions with those places. So although many mysteries have been solved over the years, plenty of questions still remain. And while Scott may have lost the answer to the box in FNAF Lore or a variety of other events within the series, as long as FNAF keeps adding layers of lore, new games, and new questions, fans will keep chasing the answers, even if the full truth always seems out of reach. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider watching my last episode where we covered how FNAF 4 actually solved the Bite of 87. And as always, I'm Jeeps, and I'll see you next time.